Good. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Madam Treasurer, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Elick?
Here.
Mr. Gebhardt?
Here.
Ms. Karstafen?
Here.
Mr. Hauser?
Here.
And Mrs. Seguin.
Here.
Would everybody please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, thank you. And welcome to the January 18th, 2023 board meeting. I'd like to introduce our group up here. To my right is Board Member and Vice President Mike Gebhardt. To his right is Board Member Elaine Sequin. I am Greg Elick. To my left is Board Member Annie Karstafen. To her left is Board Member Len Hauser. To his left is our Superintendent Ann Slosh. And all the way down on the end is the award-winning treasurer, Joy Clickinger. Okay, I believe, Madam Treasurer, do we have any, well, you know what, before we talk about visitor comments, we are excited, we do have a presentation today by Dr. James Knight. Dr. Knight, you are up. Please come forward and share your presentation with us today.
Glad to be with you guys. I just jump right in.
Go for it, Dr. Knight.
Just jump right in. Let's go.
Yes.
All right.
Cool. So, it's definitely an honor to be able to be here, to be able to work with Elyria City Schools as a resident of Elyria. And so I've been living in Elyria for over 20-some years. Originally born and raised in Chicago. But I got started in the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion about 9 years ago. And part of that was because I had opportunity to go to St. Edward High School and to transform that community, because that community was experiencing a lot of diversity, a lot of demographic shifts and so forth. And so I had opportunity to meet Ann and at a superintendent's meeting and share some of my work. And so my work is really around heart. And so I approach, relationships from a different lens, right? I approach it through this lens that's rooted in humility. And so I'm going to introduce you to that concept today. So what you see on the screen is you essentially see two fingerprints. My son helped me develop that. So that's kind of like two fingerprints representing two people from two different backgrounds forming heart. And so I really believe that a lot of what we're dealing with in our society is that people have become so polarized that they don't listen, that they can't have decent conversation. And so I really believe that we need a vaccination of humility, that we need to bring more of our heart to this discussion, because a lot of it is rooted in misunderstanding, is rooted in that, a lot of political rhetoric that we hear, a lot of he say, she say, and we just don't realize that we have a lot of things in common. And so that's what I try to do. And so part of the work, I'm not sure how far it'll reach. You gonna click for me and stuff?
Marty's probably blocking it.
Yeah, he might be
No, I'm
blocking
just
with the
kidding.
camera or whatever.
Just kidding, Marty.
You can
She's
click
gonna
for me
click
and
for,
stuff.
yeah.
All right, so one of the things that we, that I say with this slide is that our world is becoming more and more multicultural. And what that means is that we have to, particularly in our education system, prepare our young people to go into a world that's becoming more diverse, to be able to have what I would call cultural wisdom, some type of cross-cultural
Excuse me, Dr.
skills.
Knight.
Yeah.
Can everybody hear him okay? I'm not sure if your mic's on. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Is it on? Okay, okay. Okay,
Okay.
okay.
All right, I got
Sorry
you.
about that.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks. And so one of the things that I say is that because our world is becoming more diverse, we need to make sure that when our young people are learning math, English, etc., that they're also getting cross-cultural skills to be able to go into a global market and to be able to get along with people and so forth. So the way that you do that, I think, is through developing cultural humility. And so you can go to the next slide. And so what you see here, many of you are probably familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And one of the things that Maslow says in his framework is that you need basic needs, right, in order to really self-actualize, to reach your fullest potential. And so I show this a lot when I work with our educators so that they can understand that everyone doesn't have the same level of blessings, right? That everyone doesn't have the same access. And that becomes important because that allows us to do effective work. When I understand that maybe you didn't eat, maybe you had a situation that might be different. So by coming at this through a lens of humility, what you're able to do is you're able to really gain understanding and not make assumptions. So I'm just going to assume that you have this. And when you assume, oftentimes the relationship begins to kind of experience a lot of friction because you did not ask questions. And so that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to equip teachers, educators with the capacity to be able to ask questions, to be able to gain a deeper understanding that will hopefully strengthen the relationships that they have with the young people. And so the middle of that pyramid is really essential, because what we want to do is we want to make sure that when kids come into the schools that they experience a level of psychological safety. We do a lot of focus on safety in the physical sense, making sure we have security officers, et cetera. But there's another layer of safety to where we want to make sure that every person who's in our building feels psychologically safe. And when people do not feel safe, then it impacts how they show up, and it impacts how they contribute, also how they learn. And so that feeling of love and belonging is really key in order for young people to really be able to become their best self, right? What's interesting, I was reading something, and one of the things about sheep, right? If sheep are experiencing some level of fear where they feel threatened, any animal for that matter, it causes chemicals in their body to be released that they're not able to give birth. And that's for a lot of animals. And so I want you to think about that in another sense, right? That when a mother who's pregnant, or when an animal who's pregnant, if they experience fear and they don't have that sense of safety, it triggers something that delays them being able to give birth. So I say all that to put the dots together, that if I don't feel safe, psychologically safe, the gifts that I have on the inside of me, I won't give birth to them. And I want you to think about that. If you are in an environment where you feel like the other, or you feel like you're on the outside, you're not going to speak up. You're not going to want to contribute. And so that's why this discussion is so important, to make sure that we're being thoughtful about how we build a culture in our classrooms so that people feel comfortable enough to really be able to let their light shine. So up here, oftentimes I like to show this slide to really lay some foundation. Very popular slide. And so what's the problem with this slide? The tree is leaning in one direction, right? Not only is the tree leaning in one direction, you have a lot more apples on one side of the tree. And so when I came to St. Edward, this is the situation that we had. Those apples represent opportunities. Young people say, I'm trying to eat. What they mean is that I want to be able to take advantage of the opportunities. So we had at St. Edward High School, kids coming from Cleveland, Sandusky, Elyria, Lorraine, all over. But not every kid was taking advantage of all the opportunities that we had there. And that same thing happens here, right? You offer a lot of great programs, but why is it that some kids, the only thing they want to do is play basketball? Well, we got to ask that question, right? Because we want to dismantle or disrupt the stereotypes that exist in our world. Hey, I think you're going to be a really great basketball player. Well, let's look at the statistics. Is that realistic? I think you could be a scholar, right? And so we got to figure out, where's that tree leaning? What direction is it, right? And so we move from inequality. The next slide speaks about equality. And a lot of people tend to park it here. And equality would assume that the world is perfect, nobody did anything wrong, but the world is not. The world's been impacted by a lot of mistakes. The world's been impacted by imperfect people. And so what that means is that we have to employ humility to be able to understand the issues that are in front of us so that we can move to what I would call equity. And so inequality, that is really where we attempt to give everybody the same thing, but somebody might have a learning disability, somebody might be experiencing other disabilities that might impact their ability to get what they need. So this work is really about equity, and in equity we give, as you go to the next slide, is when we give, the child a little bit more, but sometimes it still is not enough. And that's happening. There are some kids we give more, and they're still not taking advantage of all the opportunities. And part of that is because there's only a few people doing the work. So a big part of my message, my calling, is that I'm trying to really pull on the heartstrings of everybody that I talk to say that this is everyone's work. We all got to be a part of this. And on the next slide, you'll see that takes a lot of work. That slide looked like a lot of effort to me. Right? And so you know what I told the folks that saying that? I said, if you think this is the black guy's job, one black guy is going to come fix this, you guys are crazy. I'm not going to be able to pull the tree back, cut the 2x4s, do all this and so forth, right? So we got to move past the artificial descriptions that we use to try to classify and try to understand people and begin to recognize that we all have something in common. We're all children of God. We're all people. And so to that extent, we have to begin to figure out what are we going to do together to make this community better, to make our schools better. And so there has to be a we. It can't be a me. So the we has to be greater than the me. Thank you. And so right here, diversity is a reality, right? Diversity is always present, is always around us, but equity is a choice. So that means that we're asking our teachers, we're asking every leader, every adult, that you have to make a decision to think with a lens of equity. But to do that, humility is going to be necessary. Because if you think you know, you might miss the mark. So you really got to begin to suspend your judgment and begin to have honest, uncomfortable conversation to be able to understand your who more effectively so that you know how to show up and how to meet their needs. And so inclusion is an act and belonging is the result of that. So what you see is a slide. It kind of gives you an idea of that. And so oftentimes when I travel the country and you go into schools, oftentimes you'll see something more towards segregation, right? Or you may see integration, but you see a situation where this group of students are sitting together, these groups are sitting together. And so we have to begin to think more critically about how can we have the kind of programming and how can we have the kind of conversations that encourages students to move past racial lines, other things that divide us as people, so that we can move our culture forward. And so really my vision and the vision of this district is to move to a place where we experience inclusion. So if I go to the President's Club or I go to this or whatever it might be, you see people from all different backgrounds and so forth. And so the focus is culture humility. And so really this is the thing about culture more than anything. I showed this video to our leaders. We're doing a book study here in the district. And I showed a video, it was by Denzel Washington, very well-known actor. And he was being asked a question because he had released this film called Fences. It was a film about an African-American family in Pittsburgh. And so the interviewer asked him, did you need to be black in order to produce and direct this movie? And his response was, it's not color, it's culture. He said there was a reason why Steven Spielberg made Schindler's List. There's a reason why this person made such and such a movie. He said it's more of a culture thing than it is color. And the reason why I say that is this. You have a culture gap that's happening in the world around us. It even happens in homes. Father, child. Sometimes as parents, you're struggling to relate to your teenager. You know why? Because you're like, back in my day, this is what we did and da-da-da-da-da. So you could either be one of those parents that keep saying back in the day, or you can say, you know what? Let me practice a little bit of humility and try to come down to my child's level and try to understand and allow them to teach me. Amazing things happen when we humble ourselves and we give people permission to teach us. And so that's what I'm asking educators all around the world. I'm saying, you know what? I know you went to school, you're well trained in this and that, but the world is moving so fast and culture is changing so fast, maybe you might have to go back to school, but a different kind of school. And you might have to say, I need you to teach me. And when you give young people that opportunity to have voice, you win their heart. And now they're more excited to learn. Now they're not thinking about, oh, you don't like me because I'm black. They're thinking like, you're taking time to get to know me, and now the real magic can happen. Because now, because I like you, I'm going to show up different, and I'm going to be more engaged in the learning process. And so cultural humility, what it is different from cultural competence. A lot of districts focus on cultural competence. Cultural competence is more like a destination. And what it looks like is this. Someone might say, you know what, I grew up in Lorraine, or I grew up in Elyria around a bunch of such and such. I get them. I know them. That's a dangerous place to be when you feel like you know someone because you grew up around them, because you're not technically them. So what that means is that we want to shift from saying we're culturally competent to saying that we are striving to be more culturally humble. Because what that means is that this is a lifelong journey. I cannot ever say I know. I will never be a woman, and I'm not going to argue with my wife and try to tell her what it's like to be a woman. I'm going to listen, and we're going to work together. And that's what this is about. And so what we see on all these news outlets is that people are debating because they're claiming to know, but no one wants to come to the table and say, you know what, maybe I don't know. I've been listening to the wrong sources. But you know what? I want to learn your story. And the thing about life gives you a lot of surprises. We've all been there before. I didn't think you listened to that. I didn't think you grew up there. I didn't know you struggled with that. Well, you know why? Because that's something called bias. We're all impacted by biases based upon where we grew up, the things that we watch. And so cultural humility is a great concept because it helps us to mitigate the bias that we all suffer with, right? It's just part of being human. And so cultural humility says, hey, what would happen if I suspend my judgment and I don't think I know, and I don't think that my culture or my way is the way or the best way. So in order to do that, the first step to cultural humility, it requires you to be self-critical. What that means is this. Before you try to fix this person, maybe you might need to fix yourself. And that's what we're struggling with in this world, is everybody's trying to fix, everybody's trying to tell you what you should do. But have you looked at yourself and say, you know what, there's some areas in my life that I need to grow. And when you do that, you're able to walk in more humility. And based upon my research and the research out there, young people, people of all ages are attracted to humble leaders. No one gets excited about the guy after the game. Let's say it's a basketball game, and he scored 35 points. It was a great game. And he gets on the interview and says, yeah, I knew I was going to make that shot. Yeah, you know, they just need to get me the ball. And he's just arrogant. You know what people say? I don't like that guy. But you know what we do like? We like the guy say, you know what? I couldn't have done this without my team. This was a collective effort. And that's how we have to approach this. This has to be a collective effort. And it requires a lot of humility. Every day, things are shifting so fast. And, you know, when I think I know, I realize how much I don't know. And so when I realize how much I don't know, I give myself the opportunity to have these important conversations that brings more heart and it brings more togetherness. The second concept of cultural humility deals with power. One of the things that I find that's really unattractive is when people try to remind you of the power that they have. And they walk in such a way that they carry themselves like, I'm the person in charge. Like, I have all the power. And so we have to be conscious of power dynamics and power imbalances. Because when there's no balance of power, then it's hard to have equity as a result. So, for example, in a lot of places that I worked, I've been the only black guy. And as a result of that, it becomes important that wherever I work, that they not just say, you're here because you're black. That's the wrong reason. I don't want that. I don't think any black person wants that, any person, whatever their race might be. People want to know that I want you to see me for who I am, which is much more than just the color of my skin, but I want you to see the fact that I have a lot of wisdom and a lot of education. I have value that I can add. That's all people want. And so we have to be careful that we make sure that we balance power. So when I was at St. Edward, this is an example of the imbalance. So oftentimes at independent private schools, if I have a lot of money, I get to determine what we're going to do as a school. But we also have a lot of families that are coming that don't have a lot of money. And so what Culture Humility is saying is their voice matters too. That's what this is about, right? So oftentimes when we make decisions in a lot of organizations and a lot of communities, it's about who has all the cards, who can write the biggest check. Well, what if the guy that writes the biggest check is a jerk? Is that going to work for everyone? Y'all look at me like I'm crazy, but I'm telling the truth, right? This is why humility is so necessary in this hour in order to move this conversation forward. And the third point of cultural humility is that you got to have some accountability. Like, you can't be above correction. You can't be above someone saying, hey, you missed it there, but I'm going to talk to you out of a spirit of love, right? And say, hey, maybe let's work together and let's come at it from a different approach. And so that's all we're asking, right? Because we believe that we have very talented, very qualified people in the buildings, but we all can grow in our leadership. We can all grow in the way that we show up and the way that we love our kids, right? When I first was a dad, I hope I'm a better dad now, 20 years later, right? It's about growth. Life is about growth. But I tell people all the time, I'll end with this quote, change is inevitable, but growth is optional. Every school I go to, I always remind them of that. You know why growth is optional? Because you have to make a decision, are you going to have a humble heart? Because if you don't have a humble heart, then you don't have a heart to receive. And that will stop you from growing. And that's what's making this work difficult in a lot of places, because people are coming at it from the wrong lens, I think. And so that's what we're attempting to do here, is really inject a lot more humility. And we believe that words are powerful. And we want to help people to be able to do that. Any questions? I got off my script a little bit, I tend to get a
okay.
little bit.
It was powerful.
What was the community that was transformed or turned around?
I was St. Edward High School
Where's that?
in Lakewood.
Oh, St. Edwards.
Yeah,
Oh,
St.
okay.
Edward's, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Dr. Knight, thank you very much
Thank you so
for
much.
taking the time to share your presentation with us. And you have a lot of information in there, a lot of hot topic items, but I'll say this, anytime you add humility to anything, I think it's a good thing and we're moving in the right direction. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, moving along on the agenda today. We do not have anyone signed up to address the board, so we'll move on to the Board of Education items. First thing on the, for Board of Education are the minutes for the January 4th, 2023 meeting have been posted. Do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Motion by Board Member Gebhardt. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Sequin. Any questions or comments? With none, Madam Treasurer, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Gebhardt?
Aye.
Mrs. Segwin?
Aye.
Ms. Karstafen?
Aye.
Mr. Hauser?
Aye.
And Mr. Alec?
Aye, motion carries. Okay, we'd also like to add something here under the Board of Education. We are going to reschedule a expulsion hearing to February 1st of 2022, and our board members will be Annie Karstafen and Len Hauser, and the other three will be the alternates. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved?
Second.
First, second, motion by Board Member Hauser and a second by Board Member Gebhardt. Any comments or questions? With none, Madam Treasurer, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Hauser,
Aye.
Mr. Gebhardt.
Aye.
Ms. Karstafen,
Aye.
Mrs. Segwin,
Aye.
and Mr. Elick.
Aye, motion carries. Madam Treasurer, do you have action items for us this evening?
Yes, just a couple. The first one is the monthly financial report, and the second one, there's a listing of donations that we would like to express our appreciation and accept. They're listed in the agenda, but let me run through them real quick. We have Elyria Charities with their final installment towards the early childhood classrooms, which is a $50,000 installment. And then we have 4 VFW posts, and each one of them has donated money to a school of their choice for either JROTC or for gift cards for family students at Westwood.
Okay. All right, so those are the treasurer action items. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
A motion by Board Member Karstoffen. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Sequin. Any questions or comments?
I'm just curious, I mean, we have so many generous donors, like, how do we determine who, I mean, I'm assuming all this stuff gets spread out, or,
Sometimes it's earmarked when it comes in. They say where they would like to donate it, or it could be a grandma works there, you know.
yeah.
Other times, we do more of a district placement, and then building principals work with social workers and counselors to make sure it gets into the right hands of need, or if parents call in need. So that's
But it's
usually how.
going out, I mean,
Oh,
I'm assuming it
absolutely.
is, but.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't sit around. We go through a lot.
And that 50,000, or, well, 150, or no, what is it, 250? 225 from Elyria Charities, that's super generous. I mean, is that just for classroom?
So
setting?
they paid for part of the brick and mortar, so to speak, of the 2 preschool classrooms at Hamilton.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions or comments? If none, Madam Treasurer, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Karstafen?
Aye.
Mrs. Segwin?
Aye.
Mr. Gebhardt?
Aye.
Mr. Hauser?
Aye.
And Mr. Elick.
Aye, motion carries. Madam Treasurer, you do have something today for us from the OFCC, OSFC, correct?
Yes, for under the construction area, it's to approve the resolution accepting the lowest responsible and responsive bid of pro-quality demolition for the abatement of Windsor Elementary and the abatement and demolition of Prospect and West High School as detailed in the enclosure.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the abatement and the demolition enclosure?
So moved.
I have a motion by Board Member Karstoffen. Do I have a second?
Second.
Go ahead.
Second by Board Member Sequin.
Saban's got it.
Any questions or comments?
Yes, I have some questions. You said that this Pro Quality had done other work for us.
Yes.
What?
Old Hamilton Elementary School, Eastern Heights Middle School that ultimately came down, and Spring Valley Elementary School.
Okay, and there was no problems? Okay, I just don't want another Shane like we had downtown. We gave them the lowest bid, and it's still going on. How many months later?
Pro Quality's references were vetted by the architect ABG and then our own
Okay.
sources and experience.
Is there a time limit? You-
There's a
They have
timeline.
included in the bid, yes.
Okay, all right.
In the bid specifications that they have, 2 and
And for the record, Shane's a company, it's not an individual, okay?
I know, I was like, Shane.
All right.
I didn't even think about that.
Any other questions or comments about our abatement demolition? Okay, with none, Madam Treasurer, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Karstafen?
Aye.
Mrs. Segwin?
Aye.
Mr. Gebhardt?
Aye.
Mr. Hauser?
Aye.
And Mr. Elick?
Aye, motion carries. Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Madam Superintendent, do you have action items for us this evening?
Just a few tonight. First of all, to approve it's a 5-year agreement with Amplify Core Knowledge for the CKLA. This is all based around the science of reading, and if you remember last year, we did K2, this is the 3-4. And then to approve the following certified staff tutor rate for the individual. To approve the OSBA services agreement on the policy web update. To approve the agreement with Burgess and Burgess on the strategic planning project. And that concludes my action items.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the superintendent's action items?
So moved.
I have a motion by Board Member Gebhardt. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Hauser. Questions and comments? I have a question on the Amplified Core Knowledge Language Arts. So when we buy these softwares, how flexible are they? Do you have to kind of follow this line on an educational process, or are they adaptable in that?
I'll let Natalie answer for you.
So the program includes textbooks, but there's also an online component. So if they make updates to the program during like in this case, it's a 5-year agreement, we'll receive those updates with the online portion. But there are core pieces of the program, if I'm answering your question.
Okay, so it's more along the line of the, it's not actually, is it the curriculum?
It is.
Planning portion and kind of that? or is-
It's our ELA curriculum. So this year
Okay.
we're implementing K through 2, and then next year we'll implement grades 3 and 4. We're piloting with them this year, a couple of our teachers, but it's our reading program.
Okay, so it does sound like there's flexibility, so it
There
can-
is.
we don't have to do exactly, we can, like, build in our culture, I guess, a little bit.
Yes,
to
I
it,
mean,
so.
there are core components that we build
Okay.
into, we have pacing guides, curriculum maps that we
Okay.
want to be consistent across the district, and then there's flexibility and creativity that the teachers can bring into the program to make
Okay.
it Elyria and to engage our students.
Okay, great, super, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Madam Treasurer, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Gebhardt?
Aye.
Mr. Hauser?
Aye.
Ms. Karstafen?
Aye.
Mrs. Segwin?
Aye.
And Mr. Elick?
Aye, motion carries. Madam Superintendent, you have personnel action items for us this evening?
Yes, just a few. To approve the appointment of the following certified staff. We've been looking for a title tutor to replace someone who retired, and we finally found one, so we're excited. And she's from Elyria, so I think you'll recognize the name. To approve the payment of the following certified staff for tutoring. Also to approve the following athletic supplemental contracts coming up. To approve the unpaid leave of absence for the following classified staff. And to approve the appointment of the following classified staff. And that concludes my personnel action items.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the superintendent's personnel action items?
So moved.
I have a motion by Board Member Karstafen. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Gebhardt. Any comments or questions? With none, Madam Treasurer, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Karstafen?
Aye.
Mr. Gebhardt?
Aye.
Mr. Hauser?
Aye.
Mrs. Segwin?
Aye.
And Mr. Elick?
Aye, motion carries. Madam Superintendent, do you have a superintendent's report for us this evening?
Yes, I do. Just a few things. First of all, I wanted to congratulate Miss Gang, Miss Jen Robson, and Kathy Pirro. They did a phenomenal job with their space night. I think that's what they call it.
Space fair, yeah.
Space fair.
Yeah.
Wow, wonderful turnout, and all the kids involved learned a lot and were engaged and had a great time doing it. So kudos to that. Also, wanted to give you an update on the referee from a while back. He is starting to work again.
Oh.
He's going to be reffing this week, and he'll be at the board meeting February 1st when the fire department wanted to honor the team that did what they did. So George is doing great,
Okay.
very grateful and wonderful. Also, just a little bit to touch on with Dr. Knight, if you remember the connection, he is the individual that worked in the SWC with our athletes, and then also other students that we brought together. And that's where the work started. So I probably should have said that at the very beginning, but wanted to tie that together. And lastly, part one of the Board of Education Thank You Recognition Month. I told Amy, this is the second year in a row she's been on her vacation during Board of Education Appreciation, but she has part two when she's back the first week in February. But part one, she's decided to give the sweetness while she was gone, and the other part of the gift at the next meeting. But I just want to say, I don't think we could ask for a better board to work with. And we do appreciate everything you do for the students, staff, and admin in the district and the community. So thank you, and just a small sugar-free treat, right?
Pass these down.
Okay.
There you
Great.
go.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
That's very nice.
support a local company in the midst, and
There you
then
go.
part two,
My neighbor.
Amy wanted to do when she got back. So thank you very
Okay,
much.
Great.
very nice.
Okay, thank you, Madam Superintendent. Moving along, Board of Education, we have one business item on here, and that's the approval of the first reading of the following three board policies. And before I ask for a motion, I will ask for our board policy liaison. If she wants to share anything with us, that would be Board Member Sequin.
Yeah, there were three updates. So this was the first reading. The first one was an internal, well, they're all internal, but it was dealt with bringing pets into the classroom. We had a teacher ask us a few months back to, if she was allowed to bring a pet in, and we didn't really have a lot of, there wasn't any definitive, I don't know how to say it, but, so we've decided that in general, just know there's not going to be classroom pets or personal pets in the classroom, but there may be instances when it's allowed for a curriculum or a teaching or something like that. But in general, there won't be classroom pets. So now it's in the policy. And then the other twos were, pushed down, or recommended changes from OSBA that dealt with pregnancy and making sure that pregnant students still continued, they had to have their education, and we have to do what we can to support them. They can be in extracurriculars, and it just clarified everything. And the other was just recruiting and rules around recruiters and coming into the schools.
Okay, great. Thank you, Board Member Sequin, for keeping us posted on that and being involved with the changes in the board policies and regulations. On that note, so for the first reading, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
I have a motion by Board Member Karstoffen. Do I have a second?
Second?
Second by Board Member Hauser. Any other comments or questions? With none, Madam Treasurer, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Karstafen?
Aye.
Mr. Hauser?
Aye.
Mr. Gebhardt?
Aye.
Mrs. Segwin?
Aye.
And Mr. Elick?
Aye, motion carries. Okay, any other things for the good of the cause from the Board of Education? Anyone have anything they'd like to add today?
Yeah, maybe just to follow up on what Ann talked about, the space fair was really cool. I had a chance to attend a great attendance by the parents, first of all, and people in the community, which was great. And what I enjoyed was I went to all of the kids, and they had facts that dazzled me that they had memorized. And I would always ask them the question. I would say, did you know about this before you did this project? And they said, no, I didn't know anything before I started this project. And so just to see their excitement to memorize all that information when they knew nothing, that was really encouraging. It was fantastic.
Great, thank you, thanks for sharing. Any other items here?
Yes, I have one. Mr. Hauser, I was listening to your show, and it talked about donuts. I think board members should eat donuts, not do donuts.
Oh, yeah, on my
Good
radio
comment.
program, I was contemplating doing donuts, but I didn't, in the parking lot, but I didn't know if that was appropriate for a board member.
Well, we have a camera in our parking lot now. I had Mr. Kokai put it out there
Yeah,
because of your proximity.
yes.
Don't think about it.
Oh, my
Yeah.
truck's easy to identify, too,
All
so,
right.
yes.
Very good. Thanks for sharing, Board Member Gebhardt. All right, on that note, one last thing here. Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
That's right. That's how you
Okay,
come out of the slide.
last point of business on here is to request an executive session for the purpose of considering the employment, appointment, or compensation of a public employee or official as authorized by Ohio Revised Code, Section 121.22, with no action to follow. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
A motion by Board Member Karstoffen. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Gebhardt. Madam Treasurer, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Karstafen?
Aye.
Mr. Gebhardt?
Aye.
Mr. Hauser?
Aye?
Mrs. Segwin?
Aye.
And Mr. Elick?
Aye, motion carries, and we are off to executive session and eating candy. Thank you.